The 100 meters individual medley is an incredibly exciting race, 25 meters of pure sprinting in all four strokes. It's a fast-paced and dynamic race that is super fun to watch. And of course, it's only possible to race in short course. We most recently saw some intense battles in this event at this year's World Cup as well as short course worlds. At the start of the most recent short course world championships, Caeleb Dressel was a 3-time world record holder in short course, but at the end of the meet, he was down to just one, the 100 IM. Despite losing other records at this meet, Dressel's 100 IM record was as safe as could be, over a second faster than the gold medal winning time. And earlier this year at the Swimming World Cup, the best IM swimmer on the planet right now still wasn't able to crack it. So just what made Dressel's world record in this event so fast, and how did it get to where it is today? We'll need to start by rewinding back to the very first iteration of the Swimming World Cup, late 1988 through to early 1989. The 100 IM was contested at the first, fifth, and eighth stops of this series, and Josef Hladký stamped his mark on this event at the fifth stop because his winning time there of 55:31 was easily the fastest in the entire series. Also interesting is that this series had a 25 freestyle at the first and last stops, which would be a cool thing to bring back just for the fun of it. At the second stop of the second World Cup, Hladký blasted a 54:66 and then sliced a few more hundreds off at the final stop with a 54:63. The following year at the European Championships, Janne Siivinen would break 54 seconds for the first time ever, throwing down a 53:78. Siivinen would manage to tie his world record standard years later in 1996 at that year's World Cup. Then at the next stop 6 days later, Siivinen would take that record even lower, all the way down to a 53:10, right up against the very next barrier. At the Short Course World Championships in 2000, Siivinen was actually still active and a major player in the IMs, where he won both the 200 and 400 IMs. However, in the 100, he would settle for second, as American Neil Walker became the first man to crack 53 seconds with a 52:79. That record would be chipped away at over the next 5 years, as Peter Mancock, Thomas Ruprath, and Roland Schumann would all inch lower and lower. At the 2005 World Cup, just 4 days after Schumann took ownership of the record, fellow South African Riek Neethling would take the record for himself. Neethling would break the record 3 times during the back half of the series, and eventually take the mark all the way down to a 51:52, as well as winning 6 out of the 8 stops. Eventually, at the 2008 World Championships, a familiar face in the IM events would break this world record, Ryan Lochte. In the semifinals of this event, Lochte would swim his way to a 51:25, and then in the final, he would slice another 10th off of his record to a 51:15. 2009 saw this record break its next big barrier, as it would see the first men to dip under the 51-second mark. At a World Cup stop in 2009, Sergei Fesikov took 2/10 off of Lochte's record to a 50.95, becoming the first man under 51 seconds. Just under a month later, that record would be broken by Peter Mancock, just 3 days shy of the 8-year anniversary of the very first time he broke that world record. Mancock unleashed a 50.71 to bring the record even lower into the sub-51s. 2012 saw Ryan Lochte reclaim this world record at that year's World Championships, as he posted a 50.71 to take it back by a few hundredths. 2 years later, Germany's Markus Daibler would clip Lochte's mark by a few hundredths at the 2014 World Championships with a 50.66, and then 2 years after that, Vladimir Morozov would do the same to Daibler with a 50.60. From there, Morozov would take the record even lower. Just 4 days later, at the next World Cup stop, he would take 3/10 off of his record. 2 years later, and once again at the World Cup, Morozov would lower his record by 4/100ths to a 50.26, and then 2 weeks later at another World Cup stop, he actually managed to tie his own record. Now, short course meters as a format doesn't see as much high-level international competition. This is because long course as a format is overall more highly regarded and more focused on, so meets like Short Course Worlds or the World Cup that would offer that short course racing just aren't focused on nearly as much. But in 2019, we saw the inaugural season of the International Swimming League, a league focused on promoting elite racing opportunities and a league that just so happened to hold its meets in short course meters. After its debut season, the ISL was back in 2020, and for many swimmers, this represented the first racing opportunity after COVID had canceled any and all competitions. During this new season, the ISL would continue to adjust its rule sets and event lineups, and this included adding the 100 IM. And this proved to be Caeleb Dressel's time to shine. We already clearly knew that he could be dangerous in a short course IM event after he set an NCAA record in the 200 IM in 2018, so now he had an even shorter event that was more geared towards his sprinting strength. Dressel found success quickly in this event, swimming his first ever short course meters 100 IM in a 51.36 to win the event in match 1. Dressel would incrementally improve every time he swam this event, and eventually lowered his personal best all the way down to a 50.48 at the end of the regular season, and he won the event every time he swam it. In the semifinal of season 2, Caleb Dressel would make history and break through the next barrier in this event as he swam his way to a blazing 49.88 to set a new world record and become the first man to break 50 seconds. But of course, that was the semifinal, and Dressel would save his best for last at the season 2 final 1 week later. Here, he would obliterate his former world record, charging out ahead of world record pace right away and never looking back, eventually touching the final wall in a 49.28. Dressel had just surpassed Morozov's former world record by nearly a full second, going from 50.26 to a 49.28. Now in the present day, 4 years later, we have one of the best IM and short course swimmers in Leon Marchand, yet even Marchand hasn't been able to crack this mark. Marchand swam this event at all 3 stops of this year's World Cup, winning all 3 and securing himself a triple crown. At the final stop in Singapore, Marchand joined Dressel under the 50-second barrier with a 49.92, the 3rd fastest swim in history. While Marchand likely wasn't quite at his peak for a World Cup series relatively soon after the Olympics, he was still clearly in very good form as he broke Ryan Lochte's world record in the 200 IM. The fact that Leon Marchand of all swimmers is still so far away from this record shows just how ridiculous it really is. After the World Cup, Marchand decided not to swim at Short Course Worlds. However, the man that managed to give Marchand a run for his money in this event would still be in attendance, Noé Ponty. Ponty was right there with Marchand in this event at the World Cup. At the first stop, he was just 1/100th behind, and at the second stop, these two actually managed to tie for the win. And what's more, Ponty broke Dressel's 100 butterfly record at Worlds. Yet, despite Ponty having about as impressive a resume as you could hope for in this event, his gold medal winning time of 50.33 at Worlds was over a second behind the world record. Marchand and Ponty both look like prime candidates to try and take this world record down, but so far 49.28 has stood strong against their onslaught. There doesn't seem to be exact 25-meter splits available for Dressel's swim, but here are the splits by 50. Things land right where you'd expect them to at first glance. Dressel is a fair bit faster on both the opening and closing 50, which is pretty much what you'd expect for the world record holder, to just be outright faster. Like I said, the ISL didn't provide splits by 25 the way the World Cup and the World Championships did, but using the race video, I can try my best to fill in some gaps, and there's one thing that stood out to me. At first, I thought that the difference maker for Dressel, the thing that makes this record just so tough to beat, was going to be the freestyle leg. Out of the 3 swimmers, Dressel clearly has the most sprint-free capability, and has incredible closing 50s on his 200 IMs in the NCAA. However, watching his 75-meter split, it looks like he makes his final turn right at 36.5 seconds. If that's accurate, and since we do know his 50-meter split, doing the math would put his 25 breast split right at 14.01. Marchand and Ponty's splits were 14.64 and 15.20, which works out to Dressel outsplitting each of these swimmers by almost the exact amount he bested their overall times by. Is this method perfect? Of course not. On-screen clocks aren't always perfectly in sync with the video, and while I did try my best to verify by hand timing, the camera angle for his breast to freestyle turn is kind of awful. But even if I'm off as much as 2/10 and Dressel was actually a 14.2, the overall point still stands, that his breaststroke was the single biggest difference maker out of any stroke. Dressel would have the most raw speed and power out of these 3 swimmers, just given his relative strengths and event specializations, which is perfect for a short burst of breaststroke speed, especially when Marchand Ponty can't just spam underwater dolphin kicks to counter it. Despite it being his 3rd best stroke, it looks like Caleb Dressel's breaststroke split is the one that set this world record over the top from being just fast to downright insane. Marchand and Ponty will likely be chasing this world record for a little bit longer. Do you think that either of them breaks in the next year or two, or do you think Dressel has it for quite a while? Let me know down below. Also, let me know what other records you want to see me take a deep dive into the progression of, and I'll see you next time.